The alarm screamed through the council chambers. Red lights flashed across every surface as the message repeated in 200 different languages. The Vrakith were coming. They had sent their final warning, and everyone knew what that meant. Tay watched as the alien delegates scrambled toward the exits. Some ran on legs, others slithered. A few even flew toward the emergency portals. Fear had a universal language, and right now every species in the galaxy was speaking it fluently. Every species except one. The Vrakith had ruled their corner of space for 3,000 years. They had conquered 47 different species. They had never lost a war. They had never even lost a major battle. When they sent a warning, smart species listened. Smart species ran. Tay stood at the human delegation's platform, his hands clasped behind his back. His colleague Rin sat at her console, her fingers dancing across the holographic display as she tried to establish a secure link back to Earth. She looked worried, but her hands never shook. That was something the other species noticed immediately. The Vrakith representative stood at the center of the chamber. It was massive, easily 3 meters tall, covered in black armor-like skin. 6 eyes gleamed with cold intelligence. It had stopped speaking, simply watching the chaos it had created. This was how they always started. Fear was their first weapon. All Council territories in Sectors 7 through 12 belonged to the Vrakith now. The alien had announced moments before. You have 72 hours to abandon your worlds. After that, anyone remaining will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact. Most delegates were already gone. The chamber that had held representatives from 93 species now contained perhaps 20. And they were still leaving, pushing and shoving to get through the doors. A few paused to look back at the human delegation, confusion clear on their alien faces. The humans stood quietly, hands clasped, eyes calm. A Rothian delegate, one of the bird-like species from the outer rim, stopped near the human platform. Its translator crackled. You must leave. Humans are new here. You do not understand. The Vrakith cannot be fought. They cannot be stopped. You must run. Rin looked up from her console. We understand perfectly, she said. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. Thank you for your concern. The Rothian's feathers ruffled in distress. It made a sound like wind through broken glass and then fled, wings folding as it squeezed through the exit. Soon, only 3 delegations remained. The humans, a small group of Kalthani, who seemed frozen in fear rather than brave, and the Vrakith representative who watched everything with those unblinking eyes. Tay finally moved. He walked slowly to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the now silent space. The Vrakith turned all 6 eyes toward him. Up close, the alien was even more intimidating. Its breath smelled like burning metal. Commander Tay of the human delegation, Tay said, introducing himself. I request permission to speak with the council chairman. The Vrakith made a sound like stones grinding together. Its translator converted this into laughter. The chairman fled with the others. There is no council anymore. There is only surrender or death. Which do humans choose? Neither, Tay said simply. The Vrakith leaned closer. You are prey. Small, weak. Your species has 3 colony worlds and perhaps 2 billion individuals across all of them. My people number in the trillions. Our war fleet contains 10,000 vessels. How many ships do humans have? Currently, 237, Tay answered. He did not look away from those 6 terrible eyes. Would you like to know how many we can build in 72 hours? The Vrakith's mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise. It does not matter. You will evacuate or die. Choose now. We choose option 3, Tay said. There is no option 3. There is always an option 3, Ring called from the platform. She had finally established her link to Earth. We humans are very good at finding it. The Vrakith straightened to its full height. Then you choose death. Your species will be remembered as the foolish prey that refused to run. In 72 hours, we will arrive at your colonies. We will show you why 3,000 years of species chose surrender over resistance. We look forward to it, Tay said. The humans stood quietly, hands clasped, eyes calm. The Vrakith left the chamber. Its heavy footsteps faded into silence. The Kelthani delegation finally unfroze and rushed toward the exits, chirping in panic as they went. Tay and Rin were alone now. The vast council chamber felt empty and cold. Emergency lights still flashed, but the alarms had stopped. Everything was quiet except for the soft hum of Rin's console. Earth Command is online, Rin said. They want to know our status. Tay walked back to the platform. Tell them the Vrakith have given us 72 hours. Tell them to begin Protocol Grandfather. Rin's fingers paused above the controls. Are you sure? Protocol Grandfather has never been tested on this scale. It could fail. It could, Tay agreed. But the alternative is certain. The Vrakith do not bluff. They do not negotiate. They conquer or they destroy. So we show them what humans do when we cannot run and cannot win. What's that? We fight anyway. Rin sent the message. Somewhere, far across the stars, Earth received the order. Somewhere, billions of humans began to prepare for something their species had done countless times before throughout their bloody history. They prepared for impossible odds. They prepared for a fight they could not win. They prepared to fight anyway. The other species think we're insane, Rin said quietly. Tay nodded. They probably think courage and insanity are the same thing. Maybe they're right. Maybe it takes a little bit of insanity to stand up when every logical thought tells you to run. Do you think we can actually win? Tay considered the question for a long moment. Outside the chamber's transparent walls, stars glittered in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, the Vrakith war fleet was preparing to jump to human space. Somewhere out there, 3 human colonies were about to become battlegrounds. I think, Tay said slowly, that winning and losing might not be the right words. The Vrakith have never fought a species that refused to acknowledge defeat. They have never encountered an enemy willing to pay any price to remain free. They think war is about numbers and ships and firepower. They are about to learn it is about something else entirely. What's that? Will. Pure stubborn. Human will. Rin smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Earth Command confirms Protocol Grandfather is active. All colonies are receiving their orders now. The fleet is mobilizing. Good, Tay said. He looked out at the stars again. 72 hours. The Vrakith think that is how long we have to surrender. They are wrong. That is how long they have to reconsider. Do you think they will? No. Then what happens in 72 hours? Tay's expression did not change. The human stood quietly, hands clasped, eyes calm, as he answered the question that would determine the fate of his entire species. In 72 hours, he said, the Vrakith learn why humans don't need to be the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. They learn why we only need to be the most stubborn. They learn why fear has never been enough to make us quit. Far away, on 3 human colonies, the preparations had already begun, and the galaxy would soon discover what humanity had known for millennia, that the most dangerous creature is not the one with the sharpest teeth or the strongest armor. It is the one that refuses to stay down no matter how many times you knock it over. The one that stands quietly, hands clasped, eyes calm, even when death itself comes calling. Hana wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked up at the sky. 3 moons hung above New Pyongyang, the human colony world she had called home for 6 years. Beautiful, peaceful, soon to be a battlefield. Her console beeped. New orders from Earth Command. She read them twice, then a third time, making sure she understood correctly. Most of the colony was evacuating. Ships lifted off every few minutes, carrying families and non-essential personnel to safer systems. But Hannah was not leaving. She had a different job. You want me to do what? She had asked her supervisor when the orders first came through. Reprogram the entire terraforming network, the supervisor had said. His face on the screen looked tired but determined. Every weather satellite, every atmospheric processor, every irrigation system, all of it. That will take days. The Vrakith arrive in 72 hours. Then you better work fast. Now, standing in the central control station, Hannah worked fast. Her fingers flew across multiple keyboards. Code scrolled across a dozen screens. The terraforming network was massive. New Pyongyang had been a dead rock 20 years ago. Humans had transformed it into a world with breathable air, flowing water, and growing crops. It had taken 2 decades, and the work of thousands of engineers. Hannah was about to turn all that peaceful technology into something very different. She started with the weather satellites. There were 47 of them in orbit, each one capable of generating storms, directing rainfall, or creating clear skies over the farms. The control systems were surprisingly simple. A few adjustments here, a few overrides there. And suddenly those weather satellites could do much more than make rain. They could make targeting systems for kinetic bombardment. Next came the atmospheric processors. These massive machines had been built to pump oxygen into the thin air. They had huge power cores and precision emitters. Hannah rewired their output protocols. Now they could emit focused energy beams instead of breathable air. Not as powerful as military-grade weapons, but enough to damage a ship's shields. The irrigation network was trickier. Thousands of kilometers of pipes ran beneath the planet's surface, carrying water to the farms and cities. Hannah had to think creatively about this one. Water pipes could not shoot lasers or drop bombs, but they could create pressure. They could be explosively vented. They could flood or drain specific areas very quickly. She programmed them to become a trap system. When enemy troops landed, the ground beneath their feet could become a swamp or a geyser field in seconds. Hour after hour, Hannah worked. She barely ate. She did not sleep. The evacuation ships kept launching, their engines leaving bright trails across the darkening sky. Fewer and fewer people remained on New Pyongyang. Soon, Hannah would be almost alone. Across the galaxy, Ambassador Young walked into the council chambers for the second time. The room was more crowded now. After the initial panic, many species had returned to their positions. They wanted to witness what would happen next. Would the humans surrender? Would they beg for asylum in other systems? Young carried a small data chip. He walked calmly to the center of the chamber and held it up. "I bring information from humanity," he announced. "Free to all species. No cost. No conditions." The few remaining council members exchanged confused looks. The Vrakith representative, a different one from before, but just as intimidating, leaned forward with interest. "What information?" the council chairman asked. He was a Velen, a species known for careful neutrality. His translator made his voice sound nervous. "Human military doctrine," Yoon said simply. He uploaded the data chip to the central system. Complete historical records of human warfare, tactics, strategies, everything we have learned in 10,000 years of fighting each other. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several delegates accessed the data immediately. Their expressions changed as they read. Shock, horror, disbelief. "Why would you share this?" the chairman asked. "Because the Vrakith should know what they are facing," Yoon said. "It seems only fair." The Vrakith representative made that grinding stone laugh again. We do not need human history lessons. We know what you are. Weak. Divided. You fought each other for thousands of years because you had no real enemies. Now you face one. Now you will learn the difference between fighting yourselves and fighting us. Yun nodded politely. Perhaps. But I notice you have not looked at the data. Why would I? Because it explains what humans do when we cannot win. The Vrakith paused. Something in Yun's tone made it curious. It accessed the data file. Its 6 eyes scanned through centuries of human conflict. Trench warfare. Guerrilla tactics. Siege defense. Scorched earth policies. Resistance movements. Last stands dot, the human stood quietly. Hands clasped, eyes calm, watching as the Vrakith representative. Read about Thermopylae and Stalingrad and Alamo and 1,000 other battles where humans had faced impossible odds. You lose these battles, the Vrakith said finally. Almost every example ends in defeat. Read the next part, Yun suggested gently. The Vrakith continued reading. Its mandibles clicked faster and faster. Because yes, humans had lost those battles. But they had made the victory so costly that the winners were crippled. They had delayed enemy advances long enough for reinforcements to arrive. They had inspired their allies with their sacrifice. They had turned tactical defeats into strategic victories. You celebrate losing? The Vrakith asked, genuine confusion in its translated voice. We celebrate fighting, Yun corrected. Winning is preferable, of course. But we learned long ago that sometimes just refusing to quit is enough. Sometimes making the enemy bleed for every meter is enough. Sometimes surviving one more day is enough. That is not how war works. That is not how your wars work, Yun agreed. Your species conquers through overwhelming force. You win so completely and so quickly the resistance seems pointless. But you have never fought a species that sees resistance as the point itself. That sees fighting back as more important than winning. The Vrakith stared at the human ambassador. You are insane. Probably, Yun admitted. But we are consistently insane. We have been doing this to ourselves for our entire history. Now we will do it to you. Back on New Pyongyang, Hana finished the final system integration. Every piece of civilian infrastructure on the planet was now linked into one massive defensive network. It would not stop the Vrakith. Nothing could stop them. But it would make them work for every centimeter of ground. She tested the systems one by one. The weather satellites responded perfectly, their targeting solutions sharp and accurate. The atmospheric processors hummed with barely contained energy. The irrigation network was ready to transform the landscape at a moment's notice. Hana allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Then she remembered something her grandfather had told her before she left Earth to become a colonial engineer. He had fought in the resource wars, back when humans still mostly killed each other. Sometimes, he had said, the best weapon is not a gun or a bomb. Sometimes the best weapon is making the enemy think twice about what comes next. Hana smiled. The Vrakith were about to think very hard about what came next. She sent her completion report to Earth Command. Within seconds, she received new orders. She read them and felt her stomach tighten. They wanted her to stay. When the Vrakith arrived, she would be one of only 50 humans remaining on the entire planet. 50 against thousands. She could refuse. She could take the last evacuation ship. No one would blame her. Instead, Hana began preparing supplies for a long wait. The human stood quietly, hands clasped around a coffee cup, eyes calm as she watched the last civilian transport lift into the darkening sky. Somewhere in deep space, the Vrakith war fleet prepared to jump. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. weapons that could crack planets. They were coming to show humanity what real war looked like. They had no idea what waited for them. They had no idea that humans had already fought real wars against themselves for longer than the Vrakith had existed. They had no idea that every human colony, every human ship, every human soldier carried the genetic memory of countless last stands and impossible victories. Most importantly, they had no idea that humans measured success differently than every other species in the galaxy. For the Vrakith, success meant conquest. For humans, success meant fighting back. Everything else was just details. The countdown continued. 60 hours until the Vrakith arrived. 60 hours until they learned their lesson. Hannah hoped they were quick learners. She really did. Because if they were not, this was going to be a very long war. The 72 hours passed slowly. Then they passed quickly. Then they were gone. The Vrakith arrived exactly on schedule. Their war fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the new Pyongyang system. Sensors across human space detected them immediately. 2,000 ships. More than intelligence had predicted. Much more. Hannah watched from her bunker, deep beneath the planet's surface. Her screen showed the enemy fleet spreading out like a dark stain across the stars. Beautiful in a terrible way. Deadly. Overwhelming. She activated her communication link. Control, this is Engineer Hannah. Enemy fleet detected. Beginning final preparations. Confirmed, a voice responded from somewhere far away. Good luck, Hannah. Make them remember us. They will, she promised. The Vrakith did not rush. They took their time, scanning the planet carefully. They expected traps. They expected defenses. They were not stupid. 3,000 years of conquest had taught them caution, but they did not expect what Hannah had built. How could they? No species had ever weaponized their own life support systems before. The first Vrakith ships entered orbit. Hannah tracked them on her screens, watching their formations, learning their patterns. They moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. Confident. Professional. They probably had done this 1,000 times before. They launched their scanner drones. Tiny machines that swept across the planet's surface, looking for hidden weapons, underground bases, anything that might pose a threat. The drones were very good at their job. They found all 47 of Hannah's defensive positions. What they did not find was what those positions actually were. The scanner drones identified weather satellites as weather satellites. They marked atmospheric processors as civilian infrastructure. They noted the irrigation network but classified it as non-threatening. The Vrakith fleet commander reviewed the reports. A nearly empty planet. Minimal defenses. A few dozen humans in scattered positions. This would be easy. The first landing ships began their descent. Hannah waited until they were committed. Until they had entered the atmosphere and could not easily pull back. Then she activated the weather satellites. Storms erupted across the sky. Not natural storms. Impossibly fast. Impossibly violent. Lightning that struck in perfectly straight lines, hitting the landing ships again and again. The ships had shields, of course. Military-grade shields designed to handle much worse than weather. But these were not ordinary lightning bolts. Hannah had overcharged the systems far beyond their normal limits. Each strike carried enough power to light a small city. The landing ship's shields flickered and failed. 3 ships crashed in the first minute. 5 more crashed in the second. The fleet commander pulled the landing force back, shocked by the sudden resistance. His analysts scrambled to understand what had happened. Weather weapons? Since when did colonists have weather weapons? While the Vrakith regrouped, Hannah activated the atmospheric processors. Bright beams of concentrated energy lanced up from the planet's surface. Not as powerful as real military lasers, but enough. The Vrakith ships scattered. their formations breaking apart. On the other side of human space, Captain Jin watched his own screens with grim satisfaction. The Vrakith had split their fleet. Smart move, probably. Never concentrate all your forces when facing an unknown threat. Spread out. Minimize losses. Jin commanded the defense of Sejong Station, a massive orbital platform around humanity's second colony world. The station had been built as a trading hub, a place for human merchants to meet with alien traders. It was not designed for war, but then again, nothing humans built was designed only for one purpose. Enemy ships approaching, his tactical officer reported. 300 vessels. They're launching boarding pods. Jin nodded. He had expected this. The Vrakith liked boarding actions. They were big, strong, and intimidating in close combat. Most species surrendered the moment Vrakith soldiers appeared in their corridors. Let them board, Jin ordered. Sections 4 through 12. Open all airlocks and welcome our guests. His crew did not question the order. They had trained for this. Every human in space, whether merchant or soldier, went through mandatory combat training. It was a tradition from old Earth, from the days when every citizen might need to defend their home. Some called it paranoid. Humans called it practical. The boarding pods attached to Sejong Station's hull. Cutting torches began slicing through metal. The Vrakith soldiers waited, weapons ready, prepared for desperate defenders firing from behind barricades. Instead, they found empty corridors, clean, well-lit, almost welcoming. The Vrakith advanced cautiously. This was wrong. Where were the humans? Where were the defenses? They spread through the station, checking room after room. Empty. All empty. Jin watched from the command center. He counted the enemy soldiers as they boarded. 300. 400. 500. The Vrakith kept sending more, confused by the lack of resistance. Soon, almost 1,000 enemy soldiers were inside Sejong Station. Jin activated the intercom. His voice echoed through every corridor. Attention, Vrakith forces. You are now inside Section 4 through 12 of Sejong Station. These sections were built with emergency separation systems in case of catastrophic damage. I am now activating those systems. You have 10 seconds to return to your ships. Good luck. The humans stood quietly, hands clasped around the activation controls. Eyes calm. The Vrakith soldiers did not have 10 seconds. They had 5 before they realized what was about to happen. Then Jin pressed the button. Explosive bolts fired. Entire sections of the station broke away, tumbling into space. The sections still had air for maybe 2 minutes. Still had lights. But they were no longer connected to anything. They were just metal boxes drifting in the void with 900 Vrakith soldiers trapped inside. Jin felt no satisfaction. No joy, just necessity. The sections had cost billions to build. Hundreds of humans had worked years to construct them. And he had just destroyed it all in one moment. But the Vrakith fleet now knew that humans would destroy their own territory rather than let the enemy take it. They would sacrifice their own infrastructure, their own stations, their own ships if necessary. Nothing was sacred except fighting back. The Vrakith commander stared at his screens in disbelief. They had lost 900 soldiers, and the humans had lost valuable station sections. This was insane. This violated every logical rule of warfare. You did not destroy your own assets. You preserved them. You surrendered them, if necessary, but you did not throw them away. Military Analyst Day sat in his office on Earth, thousands of light years away from the fighting. His job was to interpret what was happening and advise Earth Command. His screen showed data from all 3 colony systems: New Pyongyang, Sejong Station, and the 3rd colony, Daegu Prime, where similar chaos was unfolding. He compiled his report quickly. The Vrakith expected conventional resistance. They prepared for military bases, warships, soldiers. They did not prepare for colonists turning civilian infrastructure into weapons. They did not prepare for defenders willing to destroy everything they built rather than surrender it. His supervisor read the report. Will it be enough? They considered the question honestly. No, the Vrakith still have overwhelming numbers. They will adapt. They will learn our tricks. Eventually, they will win. Then what is the point? The point is that when they finally win, they will have lost so much that winning will feel like losing. The point is that every other species in the galaxy is watching right now. They are seeing that humans cannot be conquered easily. They are seeing that we make our enemies pay a price they never expected. And if we lose anyway, then we lose fighting, they said simply. And that matters more than most species understand. Back on New Pyongyang, Hana monitored her systems. The Vrakith had pulled back their landing forces. They were bombarding the planet from orbit now, trying to destroy the weaponized infrastructure. It was working. Her weather satellites fell silent one by one. Her atmospheric processors exploded under sustained fire. But it took time. It took ammunition. It took focus. And while the Vrakith fleet concentrated on New Pyongyang, human ships were arriving in other systems. Small ships. Fast ships. Ships that hit enemy supply lines and then vanished before the Vrakith could respond. Hannah knew she would not survive the next few hours. The enemy bombardment was getting closer to her position. Her bunker was deep, but not deep enough. Eventually, they would find her. She did not feel afraid. She felt calm. The human stood quietly, hands clasped over her console, eyes calm as she sent her final report. Defensive systems 90% destroyed. Enemy has committed significant forces to this position. Estimate 3,000 ships and 10,000 troops engaged. Mission successful. I kept my promise. They will remember us. The response came immediately. Just 2 words. Thank you. Hana smiled and prepared to meet whatever came next. 3 months passed. The Vrakith had expected 3 days. Their war fleet sat scattered across human territory, bogged down in fighting that made no sense. They had superior numbers. They had better technology. They had more ships, more soldiers, more everything. And yet they were not winning. They were grinding forward, yes. Taking ground, yes. Destroying human positions, yes. But the cost was unimaginable. For every human colony world they captured, they lost hundreds of ships. For every station they destroyed, thousands of their soldiers died. The victories felt hollow. Diplomat Sora stood before the Galactic Council and presented her daily report. She had been doing this for weeks now, showing footage from the battlefronts. The other species watched in horrified fascination. Today's footage showed the final defense of New Pyongyang. The Vrakith had finally located all the human holdouts, including Hana's position. They had sent a full assault force. 5,000 troops against 1 engineer in a bunker. The recording showed the bunker's last moments. Hana had rigged the entire structure with explosives. Not to kill the enemy, though it did that too. No, the explosives were designed to collapse the underground tunnel network that she had spent weeks mapping. When the Vrakith broke through her final door, she triggered everything. The explosion created a crater 3 kilometers wide. It killed all 5,000 Vrakith soldiers. It also destroyed the primary water processing facility for the entire southern continent. The Vrakith had won the battle. They had eliminated the human defender. But now they controlled a planet where half the water infrastructure was destroyed. They had conquered a broken prize. Sora froze the footage at the moment before the explosion. The image showed Hana sitting calmly at her console, one hand reaching for the detonator. The human stood quietly, hands clasped, eyes calm. This is Engineer Hana, Sora told the council. 28 years old, civilian, no military training beyond the mandatory service all humans complete. She held an entire Vrakith assault force at bay for 42 days. When they finally reached her, she destroyed everything rather than surrender. Why? A council member asked. The question was genuine. Why would she throw away her life like that? She could have surrendered. The Vrakith take prisoners sometimes. Sora smiled sadly. Because humans do not measure success the way you do. Hannah's mission was not to survive. Her mission was to make the Vrakith pay a price. She succeeded. Those 5,000 soldiers will never fight another battle. That water infrastructure will take the Vrakith months to rebuild. One human caused all that damage. She changed the footage. Now it showed Silijiang Station. Captain Jin had not stopped with that first separation. Over the following weeks, he had made the Vrakith pay for every section of the station. They would board. He would separate. They would board again. He would separate again. By the end, Sejong Station barely existed. Just the central command module remained, still broadcasting defiance. The Vrakith had finally destroyed it completely. Jin and his entire crew died when the last railgun shot punched through their hull. But the Vrakith had lost 12,000 soldiers in the process. 12,000 for one station. Captain Jin, Sora said. 43 years old. Career merchant before the war. Commanded a trading station. He had no warships. No weapons except what he improvised. He held his position for 97 days. The Vrakith needed a full battle fleet to finally destroy him. More footage. More stories. A mining colony on Daegu Prime, where 60 humans had held off an invasion force by collapsing the mines on top of the enemy. A cargo ship that had rammed a Vrakith cruiser at full speed, both vessels exploding in a ball of fire. A communications outpost where the last operator had broadcast tactical data to human forces, even as enemy soldiers broke down Hadordon's story after story. Sacrifice after sacrifice. The council members watched in silence. Finally, a Rothian delegate spoke. The same one who had warned Tay to run all those months ago. We understand that humans are brave. We understand that you fight hard. But the Vrakith are still winning. They have captured 2 of your 3 colonies. They have destroyed most of your fleet. What is the point of all this death if you are losing anyway? Sora had been waiting for this question. Come with me, she said. Let me show you something. She led a group of delegates to a private viewing room. There, she showed them different footage. Not from the battlefronts. From Vrakith territory. The images showed Vrakith cities. Vrakith civilians watching broadcast reports from the war. And what Sora saw in those alien faces was something new. Something the Vrakith had never experienced before. Fear. For 3,000 years, the Vrakith had been the monsters. They were the ones other species feared. But now their own people were afraid. Afraid of humans. Afraid of a species that refused to quit. Afraid of an enemy that turned every defeat into a costly victory. Look at their recruitment numbers. Sora pointed to data scrolling across the screen. Down 40%. Look at their war bond sales. Failing. Look at their casualty reports. They have lost more soldiers in 3 months fighting humans than they lost in the last 30 years fighting everyone else combined. She switched to intercepts of Vrakith military communications. The translations scrolled past. Commanders complaining about low morale. Soldiers requesting transfers away from human sectors. Officers asking when the war would end. The Vrakith are not just fighting our ships and soldiers, Sora explained. They are fighting the idea of us. They are fighting against a species that does not know how to quit. And that idea is spreading. She showed them the final piece of evidence. Reports from other Vrykith-controlled systems, rebellions, small at first. A refusal to pay taxes here. A strike there. But growing. Because the conquered species were watching the human resistance. They were learning. If humans could fight back, maybe they could too. General Wu coordinated the human counteroffensive from a hidden command ship. Earth had been building new vessels in secret, using the time bought by the colonial defenders. Not many ships. Not enough to match the Vrykith numbers. But enough to make a difference. All fleets, this is General Wu. You know your assignments. Hit them where they are weak. Make them chase you. Make them spread their forces. Do not let them concentrate. Do not let them rest. Across human space, small battle groups began attacking Vrykith supply lines. They struck and vanished. Struck and vanished. Never staying to fight a prolonged battle. Never giving the enemy a chance to bring their superior numbers to bear. It was not glorious. It was not honorable by most species standards. But it worked. The Vrykith had to divert ships to guard their supply convoys. They had to spread their fleet thinner. They had to react to human moves instead of dictating the pace of the war. For a species that had conquered through overwhelming force, this was unfamiliar territory. They did not know how to fight an enemy that refused to meet them head-on. They did not know how to deal with a foe that saw retreat as just another tactic. Wu reviewed the strategic map. The situation was still terrible. Humans were still losing territory, still losing ships, still dying by the thousands. But the Vrykith advance had slowed. Their casualties were mounting. Their people were questioning the war. How long can we keep this up? His second-in-command asked. As long as necessary, Wu replied. The human stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back, eyes calm. The Vrykith think this is a war of conquest. They think if they push hard enough, we will break. They are wrong. This is a war of will. And we will not break. We will bend. We will bleed. We will suffer losses that would destroy other species. But we will not break. And if they never give up, then we make sure that winning costs them more than losing would have. Back at the council chambers, Sora finished her presentation. The delegates sat in stunned silence. They had watched 3 months of brutal combat. 3 months of a species that should have been conquered in 3 days still fighting, still resisting, still making the Vrykith pay in blood for every meter of ground. This is insane, the Rothian delegate whispered. This is not how war works. No, Sora agreed. This is not how your wars work. But this is how human wars have always worked. We have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We know every dirty trick, every desperate tactic, every way to make victory too expensive to achieve. And now we are using all of it against the Vrykith. She looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. You asked what the point is if we are losing anyway. The point is this. The Vrykith will eventually conquer our colonies. But they will be crippled doing it. And every other species in the galaxy will know that humans can be beaten, but never cheaply. Never easily. Never without a price that makes you question if it was worth it. The human stood quietly, hands clasped, eyes calm, as she let that sink in. 6 months after the invasion began, Ambassador Tay returned to the council chambers. The room looked different now, more crowded. Every species had sent representatives. Even those who had fled during the first Vrykith warning had come back. They all wanted to see what happened next. The Vrykith delegation sat in their assigned section. But it was not the same confident representative from before. That one had been recalled weeks ago, court-martialed for failure. This new diplomat was younger, smaller, its mandibles twitching nervously. Tay walked to the center of the chamber. He carried a datapad, but did not look at it. He had memorized everything he needed to say. 6 months ago, he began. The Vrakith demanded that humanity surrender 3 colony worlds. We refused. They said we would be destroyed in 72 hours. We were not. He paused, letting the simple facts settle. Around the chamber, delegates leaned forward to hear better. The Vrakith invaded our territory with 2,000 ships and millions of soldiers. They had every advantage: numbers, technology, experience. For 3,000 years, no species had successfully resisted them. We should have lost. The Vrakith delegate's eyes tracked Tay's every movement. It looked afraid. That alone was remarkable. A Vrakith, afraid. 6 months ago, such a thing would have been unthinkable. We did lose, Tay admitted. In terms of territory, in terms of casualties, in terms of material losses. The Vrakith conquered 2 of our 3 colony worlds. They destroyed much of our fleet. They killed thousands of our people. By every traditional measure of warfare, they won. He let that statement hang in the air. Some delegates looked confused. Was this a surrender speech? An admission of defeat? But, Tay continued, warfare is not only about territory or casualties or material. It is about will. It is about cost. It is about making the enemy question whether victory is worth the price. He activated his datapad. Holographic displays filled the chamber. Charts, graphs, statistics. The Vrakith lost 6,000 ships fighting humanity, more than they lost in their last 100 conquests combined. They lost 300,000 soldiers. Their economy is strained, supporting a war that should have ended in days. Their people are questioning their leadership for the first time in recorded history. More displays. Images from Vrakith territory. Protests. Demonstrations. Things that had never happened before in their authoritarian society. But most importantly, Tay said, they lost something that cannot be measured in ships or soldiers or economic output. They lost their reputation for invincibility. He turned to face the Vrakith delegate directly. Every species in this galaxy believed you could not be stopped. They believed resistance was futile. They believed the only choice was surrender or death. We showed them a third option. We showed them that you can be hurt. That you can be made to pay a price so high that even you will reconsider. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the translation system seemed to hold their breath. And now, Tay said quietly, we come to the present moment. The Vrakith hold 2 of our colony worlds. They want to negotiate a peace treaty that recognizes their conquest. They want us to accept defeat and move forward. He smiled. It was not a happy smile. We have different terms. The Vrakith delegate stood quickly, its chair scraping against the floor. You cannot dictate terms. You lost. You have no leverage. We have all the leverage, Tay replied calmly, because you know what happens if this war continues. You have studied our history now. You know that we can fight like this for years, decades. We can turn every meter of ground into a blood-soaked nightmare. We can make your victory so expensive that your entire civilization collapses under the weight of it. He advanced a holographic display. It showed a projection. Human resistance continuing for 5 more years. 10 years. 20 years. The Vrakith casualty numbers climbing into the millions. Their economy failing. Their empire beginning to crack as other conquered species took inspiration from human stubbornness. This is not speculation, Tay said. This is mathematical certainty. We have war-gamed every scenario. We have analyzed your logistics, your production capacity, your social cohesion. We know exactly how much damage we can do before we finally fall. And we know that by the time you finish conquering us, you will be too weak to hold your existing empire together. The Vrakith delegate stared at the projections. Its mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "What do you want?" "Complete withdrawal from all human territory," Tay said simply. "Immediate. No conditions. You leave and you never come back." "Impossible. We already control 2 of your worlds. We have paid for them in blood. We will not simply abandon them." "Yes," Tay agreed. "You will. Because the alternative is watching your entire empire crumble. You have a choice. Take your losses now and retreat with your power mostly intact. Or continue fighting until you are too weak to maintain any of your conquests." Around the chamber, other delegates watched with wide eyes or wide equivalents. This was unprecedented. A defeated species dictating terms to its conqueror. It made no sense by traditional logic, but the Vrakith delegate was not stupid. It had read the reports. It had seen the projections. It knew that Tay was not bluffing. Humans would fight to the last person if necessary. They would turn their final colonies into fortresses. They would make every day of occupation a nightmare. And worse, other species were watching. Other conquered peoples were learning from the human example. Rebellions were already starting in Vrakith territory. Small now, but growing. If the war with humanity continued, those rebellions would become uncontrollable. The Vrakith had won the battles, but they were losing the war. "We need time to consider," the delegate said finally. "You have 72 hours, Tay replied. "After that, we assume you have chosen to continue fighting, and we will make you regret that choice every single day for the rest of your existence." The human stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back, eyes calm. The Vrakith delegate left the chamber. The other species erupted into excited conversation. The council chairman called for order, but even he looked stunned. Later, in a private room, Rin found Tay staring out a window at the stars. "Do you think they will accept?" she asked. "Yes," Tay said. "They are predators. They understand cost-benefit analysis. They know that we are prey that will chew through their stomach if they try to swallow us. Better to spit us out and find easier meals. And if they do not accept, then we fight. For years. For decades. However long it takes." Rin was quiet for a moment. "We lost a lot of people. Hana, Jin, so many others. I know. Was it worth it?" Tay turned to face her. "That depends on what happens next. If the Vrakith withdraw and we rebuild, then yes. Those people bought us our freedom. If the war continues and we all die, then history will not exist to judge whether it was worth it. But we will have fought to the last breath, and that is all any species can do." 3 days later, the Vrakith gave their answer. Full withdrawal from human territory. Reparations for damages. A treaty guaranteeing non-aggression for 100 years. The council erupted in chaos again, but this time it was celebration. The impossible had happened. A species had successfully resisted the Vrakith. Not through superior force, not through better technology, but through sheer bloody-minded refusal to quit. Tay accepted the treaty documents formally. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply acknowledged the Vrakith surrender with a nod. Later, as the chamber cleared, a Rothian delegate approached him. The same one who had warned him to flee 6 months ago. "How did you know?" it asked. That very first day, when we all ran. "How did you know you could win?" Tay considered the question carefully. He thought about Hana, dying in her bunker to destroy a water facility. He thought about Jin, sacrificing his station piece by piece. He thought about all the humans who had fought impossible odds simply because someone needed to fight. "We did not know we could win," he admitted. "But we knew that not trying would be worse than dying. We knew that surrendering without resistance would haunt us forever. We knew that our ancestors fought 10,000 years of wars against each other, and they did not suffer through all that history just so we could give up the first time someone threatened us. But knowing the outcome and fighting anyway, the Rothian said, struggling to understand. That is illogical. No, Tay replied gently. That is human. Logic says to run from danger. Logic says to surrender to superior force. Logic says to survive at any cost. But we learned long ago that some things matter more than survival. Some things matter more than logic. Dignity, freedom, the right to stand up and say no, even when the universe says you must say yes. The Rothian's feathers ruffled, a sign of deep thought. The galaxy will never be the same. The Vrakith were our greatest fear. Now they have been beaten by a species with only 3 colonies. They were not beaten by 3 colonies, Tay corrected. They were beaten by the idea that resistance is possible, that standing up to bullies matters, that fighting back, even when you know you will probably lose, can still change everything. The humans stood quietly, hands clasped, eyes calm, as the delegate walked away, shaking its head in wonder and terror at what humanity had proven.